It's a real pleasure to have you here for today's webinar. I'm Henry Shepard. I'm Assistant Director of the Stevens Initiative, and we're so pleased to be presenting a case study about the M2GATE program, which the Stevens Initiative supported over the past few years at the William Davidson Institute at the University of Michigan. We're very glad to be hosting this webinar so that you can learn more about virtual exchange, and we're pleased to be joined by the person who wrote the case study, as well as by two of the key staff members of the M2GATE program who will talk more about their experience. And I'll let each of them introduce themselves in a moment. To learn more about them, you can read their bios in the event emails that we've been sending out. So we'll start with our questions and then turn it over to the audience for your questions. To submit a question at any time during the webinar, please type the question in the Q&A box here in the Zoom video conference. And if you have any technical issues, please also type your technical issues or questions in the Q&A box as well. And the colleagues will be sure to get back to you as soon as they can. If you want to help spread the word about what you learned during this webinar, you can tweet with the hashtag #WorldClassConnection on Twitter. That would be a big help to help us spread the word about virtual exchange. And so now I'd like to turn it over to our speakers so that they can introduce themselves and explain briefly their role in the project.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Neuhaus, and I'm a Senior Project Manager at the William Davidson Institute at the University of Michigan. And I was the Program Coordinator for the M2GATE program that we're going to be talking about today. And it's a pleasure to be with you all.
And hi, I'm Nathan Ralbiri. I work at the William Davidson Institute as well. I'm in the education sector, and I, like Megan, helped implement the program. I was kind of Megan's right-hand person on the program, as I am kind of literally right now. And I worked specifically in curriculum, student support, and evaluation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tala. I worked on developing with the team this case study. And just briefly, I'm the founder of a very small NGO back in Lebanon, working on citizenship education. I've been in the development and humanitarian sector for the last 8-9 years, and I'm so glad to be here and talking to you about this project and this specifically case study.
Thank you all so much for being here. It was such a pleasure to work with Tala on developing this case study. She did a remarkable job designing the Stevens Initiative's approach to writing case studies and sharing knowledge about virtual exchange. And of course, to have a chance to revisit the M2GATE program with Megan and Nathan was great as well. So we're really pleased to dive into the conversation. And I was hoping we could start by having Nathan and Megan just say a little bit more about the M2GATE program. So can you please briefly explain what the M2GATE program was and describe what inspired you and your colleagues to create it?
Definitely, Henry. So M2GATE, you might be wondering what it stands for. So it stands for the MENA Michigan Initiative for Global Action Through Entrepreneurship. It brought together over 400 young people from Michigan, Egypt, Libya, Morocco, and Tunisia through an open enrollment model of virtual exchange. The participants worked together on teams to identify a social issue or challenge and propose a business solution to that challenge. There's a business pitch competition that was a part of each cohort of the program. They also went through a series of e-learning modules, which Nathan may talk a little bit more about later. And they were also supported by MENA-based mentors throughout the program as well. The program culminated in an in-person pitch competition that we held at the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan for the winning teams from each cohort. And the reason why we developed this program is because we really wanted to create an opportunity for students, for young people to connect with others from different cultures and to transfer business skills and knowledge. And it was a great way to leverage our organization's expertise in entrepreneurship and training as well.
Megan, you mentioned that it culminated in a business plan development and pitch competition. I'm wondering if one of you can tell us a little bit more about the components that led up to that culminating experience. What was on the agenda? How did it run?
Definitely. I'll let Nathan take that one.
Sure. So the program design essentially was an 8-week-long design challenge. And we ran that 3 different times. But over the 8 weeks, students got to know each other, started to build relationships on their teams. As Megan mentioned, it was a team-based kind of program. So students were on teams of 4 to 6, intentionally interregional teams. And, you know, alongside, so students really, alongside their project that they were creating, which was designing a social enterprise, they had e-learning curriculum modules to kind of accompany them through the stages of that design. So starting out with cross-cultural team building, and then leadership, communications, design thinking and creative inquiry. And then they went on to introduction to entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship, and finally the business model canvas. So we tried to take them through the stages of learning that they would need to put together and ultimately pitch a business solution.
And so the audience has a bit of a sense of it. What did this look like in practice? What did it see? What was the experience like on maybe a weekly basis for the participants? What were the different kinds of technology that were used or settings that they found themselves in, either in a group or independently, to both learn and attend these, you know, and take on these modules, but then also to have the discussion and to work together?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, we began each cohort of the program with a large synchronous kickoff, giving teams and students a roadmap of what the program is going to look like to help them start off on a good foot in building their relationships. And then each subsequent week, we kind of released to them a new e-learning module that they could watch on their own time asynchronously, some discussion questions and exercises they could do on their teams to really solidify and cement their learning within their teams, as well as we had 3 assignments along the way. So those weren't due every week, but they were in step with where they were in the e-learning curriculum. Now, just to give students a sense of what they needed to be doing, we sent out weekly newsletters, which we found to be really valuable, saying, here's what your team needs to do this week. Organize among yourselves a time that you can meet synchronously over the platform of your choice. Or in our case, we provided them each team a unique Blue Jeans meeting space. So we told them you could use that, you could use your own platform, find a time to meet and talk about these questions. Here's where you should roughly be at on your project. And then we really let teams kind of take the lead on that. We did provide them mentorship support. And so every once in a while throughout the program, there was a mentor check-in, et cetera. But we really tried to, on a weekly basis, provide them guidance on what to be doing via that newsletter and e-learning curriculum.
Megan, you talked about how this program was active in several countries in the Middle East and North Africa. How did you form those partnerships, and what did you learn about working with partners around the world and across the region?
Yeah, so you know, so a lot of the partnerships that were a part of this program, we found through just using existing personal connections that we had with, you know, kind of key individuals at these different universities or a nonprofit in the case of Libya. And one of the partners, we had previously worked with them on another project in the past. So, you know, in terms of things that I learned about building strong partnerships, so I think one is, of course, you know, try to go with institutions that you've worked with before, where it's been successful, where you have those strong institutional linkages in place already. That's definitely ideal. You know, regardless though, setting up regular check-ins with them, just having streamlined communication, setting up those modes of communication, what those norms are going to be from the very beginning, and creating clear roles and responsibilities. Those are things that we, you know, found really essential in terms of our partnerships and working with partners, you know, who we often rely on in the field since we can't be there. And then to have clear processes in place for partnering with your institution and making sure that those, you know, whatever your institution's requirements are, that those partners are able to work within that as well. And then also, very importantly, having administrative and faculty champions who you can call on when you need them. Because, you know, even if you set up everything and everything can be going really smoothly and the systems are in place, things always come up. And, you know, having someone that you know is going to be responsive, is going to be, you know, fighting for you and for your program when you know, can't be there and in a way that you can't is very important. So.
Thank you both for that very helpful background on the program. I want to ask Tala, as you were setting out on this project of developing a case study for a Stevens Initiative program, what stood out for you as you started learning about the M2GATE program, and why did you feel it was an important one to write a case study about?
I think that's a very important question. I was thinking about it, and I really remembered that it was a choice, because at the beginning, I was a bit confused. We had so many projects funded by the Stevens Initiative, and we were like, which one to select? And I was reading all those programs that were funded. And then when I was reading about the M2GATE, and honestly, more specifically about Megan, because I wanted the case study to be about not only, you know, a typical case study, but about a story. And behind a story, there's always a person and a mission, of course. And I realized that the combination of both the story of Megan and the person, of course, and the technical and the diverse components of the program made me select or choose the M2GATE. So this is if you want the main thing, this is why I chose it. And of course, with the team and everyone.
Megan, you were gracious in letting us draw on your story, which is a central part of the M2GATE story, in laying out the case study. So I'm wondering if you could say a word about what brought you to the point of the beginning of this program, because I think a lot of our audience probably have some commonalities there that inspire their own work as well.
Sure, yeah. So, you know, so from, I had an experience when I was young of basically an in-person exchange. And, you know, I was only 5 years old, but even, you know, so young, it made a really big impact on my life and, you know, how I saw the world and people around me. And from that time, I really had an appreciation for just the impact that can have on a person and just the trajectory of their life and their work and, you know, what they care about, what's important to them and how they see the world. And, you know, and that kind of carried through to working closely with international students at my university, at Grand Valley State University, and also studying abroad 4 times in 4 different locations, including in Egypt, in the Middle East, or North Africa. And so, you know, my own story and, you know, my own interactions and friends that I made and connections and the impact that had on me made a big difference for me as an individual, as a person. So, you know, when we were thinking about doing and applying for this, this funding opportunity with the Stevens Initiative, that's something, you know, that I was definitely really interested in and passionate about was, you know, facilitating opportunities for more young people to have these types of experiences. And you know, young people don't always get these experiences, and something I'm really grateful for myself. So that's, yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I know from speaking with others on your team, but I think it's almost universal in this exchange world, whether in-person exchange or virtual exchange. So many of the people who dedicated their careers and spend so many countless hours, so much passion, are often inspired by an experience that they had as well. And so it's an opportunity for all of us to translate that inspiration into a concrete opportunity to share it with more people and to extend it. And the inspiration is obviously a big part of why we do the work, but we inevitably run into pitfalls, challenges, unexpected impediments that can often leave us wondering whether it's worth it. So I'm curious to know about some of the issues that you all ran into as you were starting and running the M2GATE program, and how did you go at trying to address them?
Absolutely. So, I'll mention one, and then, Nathan, I think, will have something to add as well. So one main challenge is definitely time differences, managing time differences. So that will come up, whenever you're doing international work, obviously, and particularly in virtual exchange. And so, we, as Nathan mentioned, had live synchronous or real-time sessions at the beginning and end of each cohort. So that for us was the, main time that as a team, that issue came up. And so for us, it really just meant working really closely with the partners when we were planning to make sure that, it made sense for each of the locations and that it was feasible. And then, as we mentioned, something that helped our, program is that the teams could, work with each other to find times that worked for everyone's schedule. Because obviously on a team, it's going to be so variable. And so, that's something that we encouraged, that we gave the students a heads up, kind of going into the program, like at that initial orientation. We let them know that it was going to be a challenge. And just encourage them to work closely with each other, to not, give up, that it was worth it. And yeah, so.
Yeah, I think another challenge that we found was just communication in general, and making sure that students were carrying forward the momentum in the program. As Megan mentioned, it was kind of an open enrollment model. So all of the learners were geographically dispersed for the most part. There wasn't, they were connected digitally and virtually, but they weren't in the same spaces. So it seemed like an extra challenge to make sure everybody was on the same page. So I think initially, I think we learned pretty quickly that students wanted a little bit more structure and guidance than we thought. We kind of initially thought, okay, well, this is great. Let's throw them into this digital learning environment and people will figure it out, and that's how the learning is going to happen. And that did happen for the most part. But we also found that more structure would be valuable for creating the kind of environment in which deep, rich learning could really happen. So we started implementing these weekly newsletters that I mentioned, just laying out what needed to happen that week, and where they should be, what would be coming up next. And we found that was really helpful, as well as just that students didn't need to keep in their head too much information at once, that we wanted to give them what they needed when they needed it in order to complete the project and be in step with their program and with their peers. So those were some of the things we learned through that challenge.
You've talked about a few things that you noted as being effective in your program. You've talked about the importance of international partnerships and certain things that you can do to try to identify a promising partner and then make sure that it's as strong and equitable a partnership as possible. Mm-hmm. You've talked about these weekly emails or newsletters to keep people in the loop about what's going on. You've talked about balancing the benefits and the drawbacks of having these self-organized meetings, the importance of leadership buy-in. Are there any other aspects of your program that you think might be promising practices that others might want to know about beyond those that you've already mentioned?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Something that, we're going to try to carry into future programs is, setting up an even stronger foundation with our partners up front. I think we really realized even more the value of partnerships this time. And also, speaking of it being equitable, for this new program that we're looking at, we're really trying to bring the partners in much more on the curriculum design. And so that's something that we realized was, kind of an oversight on our side. The first time that we did this, we definitely, got a little bit of feedback, but we designed it much more in-house at that point. And so we're really excited to try to make our relationships more equitable. And one big way is to do that. And also through doing some like co-teaching as well, because this new model is going to be a like a connected classroom model that we're going to be doing. So I think those are some things. Anything else to add there?
I'll just add one thing. as we've mentioned, this was a really project-based kind of program, and we fit a lot into 8 weeks, an entire design challenge into 8 weeks. And I think going forward, I mean, we both learned the value of and are excited to try to work on this going forward in future programs, is really take the time up front to build a strong foundation for teams and help them really establish trust and get at some of the cross-cultural interactions that we would hope students would have. People did have really good cross-cultural experiences on the whole in the program, but we think for their success in the project and their long-term effects of the program, all the time we could give them to really establish trust up front would be time well spent. So that's something we're excited to keep learning about going forward.
You've alluded a few times to what you're excited about going forward or what you think about for your next virtual exchange programs. And I think this would be a good time to talk a little bit about what you are preparing to do now. You all have been awarded another Stevens Initiative Award for a different program. So if you could just briefly describe it and talk about what might be carried over in some ways, but also what's notably different and why, that would be really great.
Yeah, absolutely. So this new program is going to be, as I mentioned, a connected classroom model. And so what that's going to look like is we have a class at the Ross School of Business that will be connecting with classrooms in Libya, in Egypt, and this time in Lebanon. And so we're, Tala, I see. So we're really excited for this new program. It's going to be a really different model for us. We haven't implemented a connected classroom model before. And, we expected to bring some new challenges, but also definitely be very rewarding. One thing that we're excited about is, as Nathan had mentioned, we learned a lot about the type of structure that students, might desire for a virtual exchange program. So we're really interested in seeing, through this classroom model, they're going to have a stronger guided experience. And so that's something that's definitely of interest to us. And in terms of the class itself, it is called Business and Culture, a virtual practicum. And it will basically be teaching, we'll be taking students through a business practicum where they're going to be learning about different business topics through different cultural lenses and sharing, their own experiences in business with each other. So we'll be looking at things like, what does finance look like between these, different countries, these different places? What is the impact of, gender if I'm a woman doing business in the United States versus one of those other countries, what are similar challenges or, or differences? So that's a little bit about the program.
A perennial question among the sort of technical questions is how we evaluate virtual exchange programs, or how we think about measuring their success or their impact. How did you all go about doing that, and what thoughts do you have about how that went and how you would go about that in the future?
Yeah, sure. So for the M2GATE program, we administered, for each of the 3 cohorts that we ran, we administered pre and post surveys, students before they underwent the 8-week-long program and afterwards, so they could kind of self-report on the skills they gained, the knowledge and attitudes they gained. And we found that to be really helpful for just getting kind of a numerical basis of where students were before they went through the program and where they were afterwards. We saw really great increases in students' social entrepreneurship skills and their understanding of social entrepreneurship, as well as, to the extent to which they are able to understand their teammates' perspectives and cultures, as well as the extent to which they understand themselves as global citizens. We saw marked increases in all those, which we were really gratified by. In addition to those quantitative evaluations, we also administered a more kind of qualitative survey, just to understand more about the inner workings of students' experiences, what went well in your team, what didn't, what would you suggest we improve about the future. And we found that to be really, really valuable from a program design standpoint. We really poured over that data in between each of our cohorts and tried to implement changes and kind of continuously improve the program as we went through. And it gave us a better lens on how we could do this going forward. What elements of program design are really, really valuable, and which ones were less so. So I think from that we found overall students had really, really positive team experiences, but it was the experience on that team that really shaped people's perspectives on the program overall. So that's part of why we really want to continue to attend to how to set up and give teams really good guidance. So yeah, those were some of the things we learned from our kind of evaluation.
We've been getting a few follow-up questions, so I wanted to clarify a few of the things you talked about. And the first one would just be to ask you if you could explain what you meant by connected classrooms. What does that mean in practice and sort of in the kind of the key point? What does it mean for you to be doing this in connected classrooms compared to your previous model?
Sure, great question. So in our previous model, as we mentioned, we just had a live, like synchronous session at the beginning and then at the end. And then in between, everything was done, I mean, basically we house the e-learning modules on our Extended platform, which is a learning management system that WDI has created. And then, sent the newsletters out via email each week. And then the students could use their platform of choice in order to connect, to work on their team projects throughout. And they submitted assignments through the Extended platform. In this new program, we'll be, actually it's classroom based. So what that means and what that's going to look like is that if I were, a student at the Ross School of Business, or we're also opening it up to actually other students from other degree programs as well. So if I were a student at the University of Michigan, I could register for this course. I would go and I would actually have an experience where weekly, so the course will meet 3 hours a week. 2 out of 3 of those hours will be synchronous or real-time connected time with those other classrooms in Libya, in Egypt, and in Lebanon. And the course will be team taught as well. So it may be that I, show up this week and I will hear about the impact of, gender and business in Lebanon from a Lebanese professor. And then, next week it could be, my US professor teaching a different topic. And so that's what it's going to look like. And then there's going to be team-based work where the student will be on interregional team, and they'll have synchronous connection time outside of the classroom setting as well.
Let me just add something to that for others who are thinking about, maybe implementing a virtual exchange. In our M2GATE program, it was co-curricular. So students weren't receiving course credit for it exactly, but it was another activity they could do to gain a cross-cultural experience that was really meaningful, but maybe they were working on the side. Maybe, tuition's expensive. They didn't want to pay for more credit hours, or didn't have the luxury of studying abroad, et cetera, et cetera. This was a way that they could layer a cross-cultural experience is really meaningful on top of their coursework. So we saw that there's some great advantages in a co-curricular model, but we're excited to try a curricular model. So students are actually getting credit through their accredited universities, and that provides some more stability and, as we said, more structure than the co-curricular model was able to do.
Yeah. And also just one more little quick thing to add on to that. Sorry, Henry, I know we're in time. It's just that one of the reasons we're also want to switch to this model is just because we feel it's going to be more sustainable in the long term. So the M2GATE model and, the co-curricular model that we described, it's difficult to continue to run a program like that without external funding. And so, by actually embedding the course in a virtual course in these business schools or in these schools, we're actually, hoping to show the higher level administration what virtual exchange can do, the type of impact it can have on the students. And then it could be funded by tuition and just part of like the normal, kind of university process. So wanted to add that.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
We've gotten a few questions earlier and since about the platform that you used. And I just wanted to say, my understanding is that for synchronous time, you used one of the typical, widely used platforms like BlueJeans. I think you said you created rooms for folks, but also left it to them for their side meetings to pick what worked best. And you mentioned that you used the Extended platform, which was developed by WDI for the asynchronous sort of online collaboration. Is that platform open for others outside WDI?
It's not currently, except for, management programs that we run. That's why we originally developed it, and we strongly customized it for this virtual exchange program and to, accommodate more of a team format and larger numbers of learners. So we found that to be really valuable. It's not available outside of our programs currently, but we found it to be a nice supplement to some of the synchronous tools that were already available.
Great. So maybe the takeaway here is to think about the combination of synchronous communication or real-time tools for video conferencing or other things like that, as well as those that support the communication and collaboration between sessions, whatever that might be suitable to the age group and specifics. There have also been a few questions about evaluation, about what exactly the instruments were, questions that you used, and how you administered them. And I'll just say a word about that, which is that the Stevens Initiative expects its awardees to use a set of common survey items that we worked on with our independent evaluators at RTI International. They're focused on global competencies, and they've been adapted from several different question sets or scales for use with virtual exchange programs from the middle school age level, essentially, all the way up through the undergraduate, graduate, and young professional age levels. So we hope that it's illustrative of what might be happening for the young people, but we recognize that there are plenty of drawbacks in our ability to make ironclad conclusions about exactly what that might be meaning. And in the absence of comparison groups, obviously another drawback as well. Notably though, the business and culture program will have comparison groups in the upcoming implementation, which we look forward to learning from. Nathan, did I miss anything important in trying to provide a little background there?
Yeah, no, that summarized it nicely, Henry. I should say, we definitely worked closely with RTI and the Stevens Initiative on the survey items. We also borrowed heavily in our items from the Global Perspectives Inventory, which is one of a number of tools designed to measure intercultural competencies, cultural competencies. So we found that to be really helpful. Almost all of the items that we used in the quantitative survey were Likert scale 1 to 5 kind of items. And then in our qualitative survey, which I mentioned, we used more kind of short answers and whatnot, and kind of poured through that kind of data.
We're going to be switching gears fully in a few minutes to go just to audience questions, and I'll remind you that we'd appreciate it if you would submit them in the Q&A section. It's a little bit easier for us to see them there than it is in the chat box. So we appreciate your submitting your questions in the Q&A section, and you can submit them anytime starting now, and we'll make sure that we get to them as best we can. You've talked a bit about the survey data, but I was hoping you could say a few more words about some of the stories that you saw develop over the course of the program. Give us a sense of some notable projects or teams and what transformation you think they might have gone through over the course of the program.
Sure, delighted to, because that was a really gratifying part of the program, of seeing teams come together, get to know each other, have good experiences. in a couple of cases, actually meet up in real life, which was really neat. So I'll start with one team that was based in Tunisia in the United States. And they designed, through the curriculum, they came to identify, hey, a big problem that is faced in Tunisia is municipal solid waste. There's not a great way to dispose of it. What's going on there, and how can we address it? And through that, they designed an app that would essentially incentivize people to recycle, called it Smart Bin. So this team, named Team Kaizen, they really got off to a strong, foot together. They developed strong friendships, and they came up with a really great design, which was actually one of the finalists. I should say one thing that was really cool about this team is when they met in person, it was hardly a change, because they had built up so much rapport together that, meeting in real life, you could kind of see the level of trust and comfort they had built up with each other. And they did an amazing job. And, they're currently pitching this solution for funding. They are interested in taking this forward. So that was an example of the kind of teams we saw. We saw teams come up with other projects as well. We had almost nearly 75 social enterprises designed in the program, and I should mention a few more. One that was, for example, an app to help women learn self-defense in order to fend off harassment, etc. Another team that designed kind of eco-friendly backpacks made of palm materials rather than kind of petroleum-based materials. So teams, when they dug in together, they really came up with innovative, creative solutions that can, really help improve societies on both sides of the Atlantic.
Thank you. Tala, you are a social entrepreneur yourself, and you set out on this project of trying to write a case study and become very knowledgeable about virtual exchange so that you could share that, convey that story. So I'm curious, the audience has asked what approach you took to developing the case study, and I'm also curious to know, as a second part of the question, what did you learn about virtual exchange over the course of that writing project?
Okay, great. So I will answer the second part first, because I was thinking about this as well. I noticed that virtual exchange can cover so many topics. Like, for example, we have projects on robotics, prosthetics, environment. It really can cover a lot. But I think the cross-cutting issue of virtual exchange is a topic that is like very dear to my heart, which is citizenship education. Because I think that the main idea of virtual exchange is to connect with the other person. But why do we need to connect at the beginning, before thinking about developing a project? Because also we want people to be able to feel empathetic towards the other person who is different, who is living in another setting, who is coming from another country. So for me, building up a citizen is not easy. And this is what I've been doing for the last 10 years in Lebanon. And when I discovered virtual exchange, which was honestly not a topic in my high priority, I realized that actually this could feed very well into citizenship education, because we want to build citizens that are aware, capable, and alerted to all the social challenges and economic challenges that are faced around everyone around the world. So why don't we use this? And this is what I liked about the M2GATE, just between brackets. The first component, the modules, they prepare students for this. It's not only doing a project and that's it. No, we need first to connect as a human beings, get to know who is this other person who wants to change in his own country or her own country, and then come together and say, what are the problems that you are facing? Let's face them together and let's find a solution. So I think this component of citizenship or active citizenship of youth engagement is very, very important and could be more developed in virtual exchange. This is one. The second question is, how did I develop the case study?
Yes, and you talked earlier about how you wanted to start with the germ of a personal story, and you built from there. So how did you start with that inspiration of Megan's personal story, and then carry it through to the very robust, full picture that people see in the document today?
Okay, I will not take a lot of time because I prefer to give the time to Megan to talk more about the project, but very briefly. So first, I read all the documents of the project, everything. From also social media, what happened, the projects, even the project in Tunisia, the recycling project, everything. I've read everything. And I realized honestly that for everyone, I mean, everyone in the audience today maybe have read more than 100 case studies in their lives. So I discovered I was asking myself, how this should be different. Because we don't have time to read. No one will read a case study that is 20 pages. We need something really smart, quick, concise, but also where you can connect while reading. So this is how I decided to connect this raw material with a person and a story. Because I think when you read, also you get attached to the person and you want to know this person. So maybe today you came to the webinar also to get to know Megan and Nathan, of course, and to understand their story. Because without the story, it's boring, honestly. A case study we all know that a case study is not the best thing that you would love to do and read every day, no. But listening to a story and a personal change and an inspiration will help you read more easily the case study. I will not go more into details because I know that we are running out of time. I hope I answered the question.
I think you did. It's helpful, and I just remember back to all of our conversations, always reminding us of the point that we need to make sure that we're addressing a real need and keeping people interested, because the assumption we have to make is that long documents are not exciting, which we reminded ourselves every day. So it's very appropriate that you would point that out to the audience today. I want to pose another question about what's happening next, or where you all are going with this experience. This was, if not the first virtual exchange run by WDI, it was certainly a sort of new and exciting opportunity for you all. What kinds of institutional changes or new steps has WDI taken as the result of the M2GATE experience? What will that look like going forward?
Sure. So one thing to mention is that kind of out of our work on M2GATE and other virtual programs we're doing as well, but I'd say M2GATE was really the impetus for this, is that we've started a center called the Global Virtual Learning Center, which is part of our education initiative at the William Davidson Institute. We're going to conduct and kind of house our virtual learning programs underneath that. With the hope to just share our learnings more broadly with the community and kind of have a, place people can go and learn about our work specifically in this space. And so that's one main thing that's come out of this. I think we've also become a lot more involved just in the virtual exchange community. We're now members of the Virtual Exchange Coalition, which some of the Henry is obviously familiar with, and possibly Tala, and then some of our audience I'm sure would be as well. But that, if you're interested in learning more about virtual exchange, they're, a really interesting group, a great group of practitioners, that meet bi-monthly and, kind of share what we're all working on and continue to learn from one another. And then also just more widely at the University of Michigan, there is some virtual exchange happening, but it's been very decentralized up until this point. And so, we've just been trying to continue to connect with others who are doing virtual exchange on campus, and also starting to, talk to administrators at the University of Michigan about the impact and value of virtual exchange. And we're really excited about this, new program that's going to be housed really in a University of Michigan classroom, along with our partner classrooms as well. And we're very hopeful that we can utilize that to show a clear example of, the type of impact it can have in order to further virtual exchange on our campus.
The Virtual Exchange Coalition that Megan mentioned a moment ago is a great place to meet others in the field or seeking to join the field and learn about other programs and share your story and spread the word about whatever you're looking for or hoping to do in the field. You can find them on Facebook. I think if you just search for Virtual Exchange Coalition, you'll find a page or a group, and you should be able to join and start attending their regular meetings. And I really encourage you to do that. We've had a few questions back in the sort of nitty-gritty of the program about the dynamics in the groups and how you keep that, how you get it going well and keep it on track. One question about how you keep people engaged over the course of the program, and another, maybe slightly related, about how you think about dealing with conflict or dealing with challenging dynamics and maybe making the most of the opportunity to have a real connection that doesn't either avoid conflict or succumb to the risks of tension. How did you get people feeling like it was worth it to be there and that they were comfortable in the space?
Yeah, really important question, and one we thought a lot about. I would say a main thing that we tried to do was really to guide students and student teams to set up at the beginning of the exchange a team charter. And we had excellent instructors through all of our modules. And several of the instructors really planted the seed on a team charter, and that really took off as a really helpful concept. So that teams, as they go through, they're beginning the exchange together by naming what they want to be norms on their team, what they're committing to, how they want to work, make it very, very concrete. And so when times get tough, or invariably as schedules get tight and other priorities impose themselves, teams can look back and say, this is what we agreed to, this is what we're holding one another to, and this is how we've planned to work on this. So I think that practice was really essential for foregrounding teamwork and means of mitigating conflict, or I should say transforming conflict. Another way that we worked on this was to provide each team a team mentor, and those were generally experts in the field and social entrepreneurship, but they were also there to help respond to if there were issues in completing the work, if there were less active team members, trying to help get them on board. So we found that was another structural thing we did that allowed teams to kind of continue to move forward the program together, even if circumstances were less than ideal.
Thanks very much. I think it's time for us to start wrapping up this session, which I've found to be hopefully a helpful way to share some of what we put on paper in the case study and what we're so proud to have supported and to tell the world about in this way. So I'd like to go around in a circle, and you can choose who goes first, to just ask again broadly, what did you learn going through the M2GATE program, or in Tala's case, working on the case study? What did you learn about the value of virtual exchange? What can virtual exchange do?
Okay. All right. So I'll begin. So to me, I think it really comes down to access and reach in terms of the value of virtual exchange. So virtual exchange really opens up access to cross-cultural and exchange experiences for those who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to study or live abroad due to their circumstances. Only around 10% of undergraduate students in the US have the opportunity to study abroad. So there's a huge gap there in terms of the opportunities. And that could be, because their degree program doesn't allow it, or financially, or they have a family that they have to support, or, they have a disability. There's a lot of different reasons that could be. So virtual exchange really breaks down a lot of those challenges or those barriers that existed before. And then also with the reach. So, as we mentioned, our program, had like an open enrollment program. And so it was open to students from the schools that we worked at in those 5 countries. But it also was open to students from rural areas to, other areas as well. And so in the end, our 400 students that participated in the program, over 400 students participated, they represented over 103 different institutions. And so we really feel that that provided a rich and diverse perspective on culture and on the social challenges that teams were looking at.
Yeah, I'll go next and Tala can have the last word here. I think one thing that I found really exciting about our virtual exchange program and virtual exchange generally is it provides the kind of opportunities that, and the types of collaboration that I hope would be more prominent in the world more generally. And what I mean by that is, it provides a great opportunity for cross-disciplinary work as well as cross-cultural. In virtual exchange, I think, depending on how you set it up, obviously, but I think it has a lot of potential to be very bi-directional and reciprocal. So there's not necessarily a guest culture and a host culture and the kind of power dynamics that come with those. Students are able to approach each other, or have the potential to approach each other from pretty, from level ground, more equitable relationships from the outset. And I would say, just building on something that Tala mentioned, that, people have, it's a way to identify common social challenges, but not just stay at the challenges, but be very solutions focused. That's what we found in our program, and that we thought that was a really positive thing and a great potential of virtual exchange going forward.
So very briefly, I want to say so many things. So first, of course, increasing the connection, but also the inclusion of marginalized communities, as Megan mentioned, and also increasing impact for social change. But what I really noticed is we could get what are the social problems facing young people, or through the lens of young people. Instead of going and doing a needs assessment, we already have them. Because the young people already discovered for them what are the priorities in their country, what are the really big issues they want to work on. So we can take this problems and solutions and build on it educational programs, social entrepreneurship program, and civic education programs. So we actually have a door into data that could help us work in different regions with different programs. So I think this is really important. We need to focus more on that, and this is what I learned and I liked. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for sharing your time so generously today. After this many months long project has finally reached its culmination, we hope that those of you in the audience will go on any of our channels, social media channels, or visit the stevensinitiative.org website, the resources page, to download and read the case study. And as I mentioned at the start, if you want to talk about what you learned from this webinar, or talk about what you've learned from reading the case study, or pose more questions, or pose challenges, or any unresolved issues, please go on Twitter and use the hashtag world-class connection to keep the conversation going. I'm so grateful to everything that the whole Stevens Initiative team did to make this day happen. Haley and the whole team have been indispensable in reviewing the case study and having it laid out professionally and checking everything 8 times and just making it a very well-run process. I'm so grateful. And we hope that you will keep in touch with us through all of those channels and attend more webinars in the weeks and months to come. I know we have more later this month, and we will throughout the rest of the year. So unless I've missed anything, I'd like to end today's webinar and thank you again for joining. We'll be sharing a recording of the webinar with those of you who attended, and a survey to get your feedback about how we can improve in the future. Thanks so much.